Did he become a soldier in the Roman army and was really attempting to maybe even be a reformer from within? Is
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. So he would have considered himself a brave patriot. He served admirably. He was, I would say, something of a hero to the city of Rome and the entire republic. And he served faithfully in that capacity for a very long time. He worked his way up the political ladder as well. But ultimately, he found himself on the wrong side of a civil war. And what Sertorius did that made him noteworthy, and he's essentially, part of the reason why I wanted to write about him is because he's essentially been removed from history. This is a fascinating man who presents us with a lot to learn, from him and his example. But he was on the wrong side, and a lot of his image was marred, and his there's only a handful of texts that weren't burned and destroyed about him. But essentially, he went and continued to fight for the republic, for liberty, fighting against what he would have considered a corrupt oligarchy. The pseudo Rome, that was restricting the freedom of its people. He continued to fight against that for well over a decade, with consistently at odds, and with so much determination, courage, sacrifice, he managed to really leave an impact.
What faith message would you want to bring to readers?
That's a great question. So this is it takes place about 100 years before Christ. So Sertorius honored the traditional Roman gods of the time, as far as we can tell. But his prevailing, I would say, his ideological belief system was more based on the Stoic philosophy, which I think certainly played a role in early Christianity. You see it in a lot of the early writing of the saints. And that was the main, in terms of his behavior, his choices, his sense of morality came from that. And at least in the story, he has a very, very close companion who is Jewish. And so he very much enjoys hearing about this one God that would have been a very strange concept to a Roman, but he has a lot of admiration for this one God. So it's interesting that I've heard a lot of times that this time where Julius Caesar and Quintus Sertorius exist, it's after the old gods, right? They were no longer really being worshipped. It was regulation, it was tradition, but a lot of folks didn't actually believe in them. And then it was before the arrival of Christ, so that we can kind of look at these men and women in a microcosm of what did they do when they had no other guiding principles. And so we see nothing but decadence and greed almost exclusively throughout that time. But Sertorius is a man who consistently acts with conviction and restraint and goodness.
So what message do you believe that this contains for Christian believers today?
I think ultimately it can be motivating to anyone, but specifically it is to stand courageous in the face of adversity, but not just in terms of general hardship, that as well, but also in resistance coming from political ideologues, let's say, from those that would like to silence your voice, in essentially standing up for what's right. I don't have a overarching political message in my book. That's not my role. That's not my place. But I want to encourage any of my readers to continue to speak out and to follow his example of courage, to not let themselves be silenced. So I think that can apply to Christians in many scenarios that we're faced with in today's world, but also many others as well.